Culture's what elevates a group. It's the difference between the sum of the parts and the value of the whole. The world is becoming harder and harder for a lot more people to live just day to day, and it puts pressure on the search for joy. I don't think people, really appreciate just how hard it is to do what we've done historically and to keep trying to do it. Anytime one person comes into the group or one person leaves the group, you've got a new group. And New Zealand Rugby, we're expected to be market dominant all the time. And it's just bloody hard. Their heads are up, their eyes are out, they're laughing, they're crying. Women's rugby is it's a different product. It's incredibly joyful and open.
Welcome to Coaching Culture, the podcast about cultivating culture and leadership. I'm Ben Herring. I've been loving this side of the game for bloody ages. Today's guest is Chris Lendrum. Chris is the General Manager of Professional Rugby and Performance at the New Zealand Rugby Union, where he manages both professional players and staff of the Super Rugby teams, as well as the overall leadership for New Zealand national teams. He has been in this overarching leadership space for well over 15 years, and that isn't meaning the game with the bigger picture insight for one of the most passionate rugby nations in the world. Now, Chris is one of the most intelligent people I know and blends that intellect with real passion for the game and the people that are part of it. And he has overseen and led a nation through the very best of times, from winning World Cups and successful super campaigns to some of the very hardest times around. Now, Chris leads in this high-performance space with incredible grace and is an absolute champion man and truly does have an incredible skill set for running such a high operational industry. Chris Lendrum, welcome to the Coaching Culture podcast.
Kia ora, Ben. Thank you. What a welcome. It's one of the best I've had. Amazing.
Mate, an absolute pleasure to have you here from New Zealand Rugby HQ in Wellington. What a absolute pleasure. Now, Chris, we will start with the big question: is how do you define culture and from your perspective?
Well, yeah, so look, thanks for having me, first of all. Awesome to be here and chat with you, mate. In a role like this, you spend quite a bit of time talking about what culture is. You hear different views and theories from people. You go to seminars and so on, and your definition probably changes over time. But the way I'm describing it to people at the moment is by asking a question, and the question is, what's 10 times 8? And the logical answer is 80, right? But sometimes when you're talking about teams, the answer to 10 times 8 might be 60, or it might be 120. And to me, the difference between the 80 and the 120 is your culture. Culture's what elevates a group. It's the difference between the sum of the parts and the value of the whole. And I don't know, mate, maybe I was slightly mathematical brain underneath there or whatever, but that's really resonated with me. That's the way I envisage it. It's about elevation. But if you get your culture wrong, as you know, widely experienced in rugby, you've probably seen some cultures that haven't been so good, then actually the team can perform less than the value of its parts, and that's when that's a bad time, and that's when people like me sometimes need to come and step in.
Yeah. So when there's a knock on the door from you, mate, that's when the culture or things have not gone to plan.
Well, I like to make sure I'm present enough in the better times. Like building trust with people is essential, right? But yeah, part of the role is definitely being a troubleshooter and helping to realign and get things back on the right path. So, yeah, you can't just have a relationship based on being there in the bad times.
No, you wouldn't want that either, mate. Otherwise, that becomes a chore of any job. Doesn't want that, right? Any role that's horrendous where you're just that person, isn't it?
That's right. Yeah, no, that's definitely right. So, I've been incredibly fortunate in the role I've been in to see some amazing practitioners in this space and just learn. Like, I know you'd agree, you're just learning all the time. Every time you meet somebody new, every time someone new comes into your group, you're learning. Um, and and cultures evolve and people evolve. So yeah, it's a fascinating space, isn't it?
Isn't it? Who's been some of the best? Who's some? Because obviously you get a lot of people walking through the door with some great ideas. Who's some of the ones? Anyone stand out that you just go, yeah, they're bloody good.
People stand out for different things. And this is one of the, I guess, the truths about leadership, right? Like nobody's complete, nobody's the perfect package. People have strengths, right? So if I think about somebody that you and I are both familiar with, Steve Hansen, right? His ability to drive motivation and accountability inside a team environment when I worked with him with the All Blacks was exceptional, right? Like he could wrap an arm around people. Players knew that he was there for them, but he also drove this relentless excellence inside the environment, and obviously had wonderful people around him, players and other management. When I look at creating real connection, I look at some of the work that I've seen in the women's game from the likes of Alan Bunting, Corey Sweeney. That you walk into those, Clark Laidlaw, another example. You walk into those sevens environments in the time that I've been in rugby, and you just feel immediately welcome and uplifted, and you can see the players and people living the values and behaviours, and that's culture, isn't it? That's when you live it, when actually everything around you looks like the words on the wall or on a piece of paper, and look, it's just an amazing role. I see so many great coaches, great leaders, and again, you just learn all the time. You adopt little bits and pieces of things you see. They start to inform your strategy or your mindset, and you go on.
I love it. Isn't it amazing when you talk about, like, when you walk into a place, you immediately feel welcome and uplifted? Now, if that's what you're feeling is walking in, you can only imagine what a new player's feeling coming into an environment. If they're feeling immediately welcome and uplifted, the answer's not going to be 80. It's going to be 120 if that's the start point, isn't it? That's the kind of invisible thing that's culture is, right?
It's a good little test, actually, that you've struck on there, is how quickly new people come to it inside an environment, because that tells you a lot of things about how people are inducted in, the care that senior leaders in a group show. The faster they feel, I don't want to say comfortable, but the faster they feel that psychological safety, that ability to be authentically them, then the faster you can get them into a high performance space, right? So to me, the high performance space is where you balance that safety, care, connection with the motivation and the accountability, right? If you get those things in balance, then you're in the high performance zone, the learning zone. If you get too much safety and care and not enough edge or accountability, then you're in a comfort zone. But likewise, if you get too much on the accountability side and you haven't built that foundation of care and connection, then you get a culture of fear, right? So the whole goal is looking to maximize both, and then you're in the performance zone.
Yeah, that's the one. A lot of people, when you talk culture, I hear a lot of people often say, "Oh, yeah, but it's a little bit airy-fairy." But what you're talking about is it's got to have an edge. It's got to have a balance, doesn't it?
It does. So there's culture and there's performance culture, and I've seen teams with edge and coaches that bring edge, but they haven't built that foundation of trust, haven't been vulnerable with their fellow coaches and management or the players. And underneath it all, it's just people are looking for authenticity, I think, and the ability to express themselves. That's a term you hear a lot in rugby, isn't it? Just want the players to go out and express themselves. Well, you can't expect that to happen on the field if you haven't enabled it off the field. And again, yeah, to go back to the maths, that's the 10-8s, isn't it? You know, how do you make each of those 8s a 10? That's the goal.
Mate, I love that, just the separation of that, breaking up culture and then a performance culture, which is the space that you're operating in. There is a difference, isn't there? Culture, like there's a performance piece to that, which is, it does create a nice distinction where you've got to have that balance of edge, accountability, authenticity. Yeah, that's a really
It's
nice
hard. It's hard though, mate, isn't it? It's hard. You'll know it's easy to diagram that on a piece of paper, and it's maybe a little bit less easy to go in and look and search for it when you're coming in. Like in my position, I'm not in team environments every day. I come in and spend time, and I observe and support and connect and draw some judgments, draw some thinking about what I'm seeing. But the hardest thing of all is to be in the arena and do it, to actually create that performance culture. And that's where your appointment of people, the people that we select to lead our programs, is just so critical. That's, for me, in my role, that's the biggest impact I can have, is really leaning in hard when we get to appoint people into key roles to try to make sure we've got the right people, because they'll be the biggest input into the culture.
Yeah. Well, I guess that drives me. What do you look for in your appointments? Like, if you're looking at a coach for whatever team, what are some of the big rocks?
Well, I think coaching is just another people role, isn't it? Like, it's a leadership role, but if you start with what are you looking for from people, whether they're, because you get people in your team, right, and they're your future leaders. So I think the qualities that you look for in people generally, you want people that are driven. I think you want people that are open, right? That have got there's that growth mindset. I guess is another term that people use commonly in the space for open. I think you want people who are competitive, right? And who are, we would say, coachable or teachable again. So it's the drive and the will to want to get better. And then when you take that up to a program leadership level, what you're really looking for is, again, driven people who are going to work hard, who are confident, right, who have a significant amount of self-belief, but that doesn't border on arrogance or a lack of openness. So you've got to have confidence in your ideas, but you've got to be open to challenge. And then for me, what's really important is alignment, right? Like, New Zealand Rugby is, I feel like, is one big team. We've got, if you think about us like a rugby club, we've got men's teams, we've got women's teams, we've got Colts teams. And yet we all represent Aotearoa, and there's got to be something that binds us together. There's a common identity there, and what I want to see in leaders is an alignment with that identity, with the organisation, and a sense that we are one team. You know, we're not in silos. That's really important.
Love that, mate. I actually really enjoy how a lot of those, like, I know this is always there, but this is almost the same as culture, is that the actual X's and O's of doing what you're doing almost goes without saying, isn't it? Like the expectation that you know how to do all the techniques and things like that, it goes without saying. What the bit that's you're choosing in is some of these human qualities. You said coaching is a people role, and this is part of this conversation around culture. Like, we understand that the X's and O's, the skills and drills, are part of it. That's there. But what we can really maximize is these things that you said, like people being driven, open, competitive, having self-belief. It's hard to measure those things. It's more of a gut feel, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a really interesting time to be talking about this with the, I don't even want to say the onset anymore. We're right in the AI age, aren't we?
Yeah.
And what to your point, what I sense is that technical and tactical rugby knowledge is going to become easier and easier to come by, right? And if you go to a sort of tech seminar, they use the word democratized, which basically just means it's going to be easier to access technical and tactical knowledge. And I was sort of preparing our coaches for the fact that probably next year when they turn up to a media conference, they'll have journalists who have input into an LLM, the question like, how should the All Blacks beat France tonight? And so rather than just, semi-informed thoughts, they might actually come with a, hey, this is the playbook. Why didn't you do this? Why didn't you do that? And so that the access to knowledge about how the game is played is going to become easier and easier for people to find and to learn maybe. But what that technological development will not take away is the ability or the uniqueness of one human or a group of small number of humans growing a bigger group culturally, right? I don't believe that technology is going to help humans get from the 80 to the 120. It'll help us max out at the 80. It'll be easier to get to the 80 from that, analogy I used right at the outset. But that gap between the 80 and the 120, I believe, and I could be wrong, this would be terrible, couldn't it? You could record this and then I'll look like an absolute muppet in a couple of years saying this. But I believe that 80 to the 120 is a human endeavour, and only humans will be able to unite and grow and elevate a group. So it's a fascinating time to be talking about all of these things. Like change is so upon us, and it's going to impact on sport massively.
Massively, man. This is a really futuristic statement, Chris. So democratize, easier to access technical and tactical knowledge as we go. The access to knowledge is going through the roof. So I guess that question becomes for like leaders particularly, and this is where you're awesome, is how and where you grow yourself, right? Like,
yeah, absolutely. And it's like everything's evolving every day, so you're never done. And what should be the case, and it's for others to determine this about me, not me, but I should be a better leader today than I was yesterday. And I should definitely be a better leader today than I was 6 months or 12 months ago. And you learn through experiences. As you know, it's often easier for humans to learn through adverse circumstances when things go wrong, and I think about the kind of crucible moments in my career where I've learnt so much, through hard times. One example that springs to mind was working with the Crusaders in the wake of the terrible mosque attacks in Christchurch in March 2019, and going through their brand, like what will we do with the Crusaders brand, which New Zealand Rugby obviously had a massive involvement with, but there was a huge amount of emotional investment in the region and in the club. And you start with ideas. I'm trained as a lawyer, and as lawyers, you're trained to find the right answer, or you seize upon what you think the right answer is. But through experiences like that, you learn about leadership and the way that you have to take people where you find them. The community in the top of the South Island was not largely in the same place and of the same worldview as I was at that time. And so, like, I learned about the difference in leading between being at the front of a group, and you can move a group if you're at the front of the group, but if you're too far, if your ideas are too far out in front of a group, so actually you're not in the group, you're way out, and you're trying to drag people to something that you might think is right, it's very, very hard to achieve that, So that's just one example, but man, been through some great times and some hard times here, and you learn a lot through those hard times.
Man, I love that statement. You can't be too far out in front of the group. That's a powerful statement, like that we don't hear a lot of. Like, can you just dive into that a little bit more? Like, what's
Yeah,
the reference to that?
yeah. I think if I could diagram it, I'd draw a circle, and I'd, if you're on the perimeter of that circle and you're trying to arrow in a certain direction, then I think, that's like saying you're on the perimeter of the group, right? You've got some ideas, some forward-thinking ideas, but at your core, you're still with that group, and that group's still with you. Then you can move them, right? Then you can move that group towards, the direction that your arrow's pointing in. But if you're outside the perimeter and you're jumping up and down saying, we must do this, we must do that, this is the way forward, it's very rarely successful. And that's, again, it's the power of connection and like even storytelling that resonates with people. That's what moves people. You just, you can't get too far out in front of your group. And you see leaders all the time making that mistake, trying to make revolutionary change when the people that they're wanting to adopt that change just aren't there yet.
Huh.
And so you need to, I think you need to, in that situation, you need to slow down, you need to reconnect, understand where your people are at, why they're at that, live in their shoes, and then reset yourself to what's achievable.
Oh, I love it, mate. Oh, it just had a little flash when you're talking about that central core. That's essentially like the heart, isn't it? And like it's the heart of an operation. And to influence the heart, you've got to do things which are a little bit immeasurable sometimes. And you just mentioned the thing like storytelling to capture the heart. And
Yeah, we're wired for that, aren't we?
Mm.
Stories, humans, and you know that. And I'm sure most of your listeners and watchers know that. That's how you connect with people. First of all, by telling them your story, right? Opening up a bit, and those are the foundations of what we were talking about before. That safety and care. I call it sometimes psychological safety. How you build that is by being open about yourself. And then that empowers other people to feel like they can be open as well. And then all of a sudden you've got something, don't you? You've got a chemistry and a connection starting to build.
Mate, that's absolutely right. And just that phrase, you start with your story first. And if you're open about yours, if I talk about my mother, it makes you think about your mother, right? Like it's that kind of principle, isn't it? So like,
Absolutely. And how open you choose to be at the outset, like are you going to be 13% open? Are you going to be 40 or 50% open? 13 is probably too low, you're just scraping the surface. It's hard to connect with. There is such a thing as being too open initially,
Yeah.
right? But I got great advice back in the day. It was actually advice about working with media, and the advice was give them a bit more than they're expecting. They're not expecting you to talk about this or be open about this. Well, just give them a little bit more, to demonstrate again that you're open. And I think that's a great way for humans to connect. Like give a little bit more. Don't have to open yourself up completely, but just give a little bit more. It's a tip of the hat to the other person or the group that, hey, this is an open and safe space. Come in and join us.
Yeah. Yeah, man. I can tell you just as a little personal aside, like I love when people say, good morning, how are you? And just, if you take what you just said and you made that part of your practice, daily practice, and when someone says, how are you? You actually give a little bit more than good. You might say, I'm actually awesome today because I had a wonderful conversation with my daughter on the way to school today about dinosaurs. And that little bit of snippet, just leads you into the other person, doesn't it? And it just brings that, oh, okay.
Absolutely. You've only got to go one step deeper, don't you? And that's so true. And I do the same thing with my kids, at times. How was your day? Why? Just why? And you'll get something, and as a leader, you ask those questions, you might get something that actually informs you and grows you, it makes you better. So great point, mate.
Do you think it's in a organisation like New Zealand Rugby Union, which you're at, do you think you can still apply that to interactions and relationships in a business setting like that? Same principles?
Definitely. I think, we're it's a funny organisation in some ways because it's a wonderful organisation, and a wonderful game, but we're caught, aren't we? We're between, I guess, a normal corporate with all the requirements that come with that, and what we call a high performance organisation. But actually, the synergies between business and performance sport are really great, right? Like there's so much commonality, and I think the world's waking up to that. High performance is a phrase that we use in sport, but it's not unique to sport. If you're a highly achieving business person, then you need probably to live your life in a way that's pretty similar to people who are in high performance sport, right? And so you start with yourself, like start with the me level. You've got to get your personal hygiene factors right. Like you've got to sleep well, you've got to eat well. If you don't do those things, if you drink heavily, you don't exercise, you're not going to be at your best, are you?
No.
Like, especially as you get older, mate, as we're both probably starting to find out, So you start with those things, and then I think in terms of how you grow teams, you look at the we and some of those success factors in terms of how you select people. We talked about driven people, open people, coachable people. You need that in business as much as you need in sport. And then the last thing is the us, which is that's the chemistry and the connection and the culture that you talk about so well on your podcast. So I just think that they're so alike, and aligned. The only difference between high performance sport and business is that I suppose not everybody can physically get to that high performance sporting level. You should have the best of the best competing, especially at international level, and maybe it's a little bit more challenging to create teams of the very best in the business world, but not impossible. Yeah. Well, fascinating stuff, eh?
I love it, mate. What I'd be really intrigued is there any sort of misconceptions around your role? Like you're obviously this overarching looking after the bigger piece, but that's all filtered down. Is there any misconceptions about your role? Because it's a public role, and you take some flack sometimes around all sorts of stuff. Is there any misconceptions you think about it?
Oh, look, there always are. You're in this environment 40, 50, 60 hours a week, right? You're thinking about taking the game forward in whatever way you can, just all the time. And what you learn is, as much as the individual wins, and the wins are great and the occasional losses are really hard, you can't live on those. You have to have a bigger and deeper perspective and a sense of the long term about where you're going. So I'll get a lot of people contacting me, say after the All Blacks lose or after the Black Ferns lose, and you can tell that they're down. They're passionate Kiwis and they want the All Blacks to win or they want the Black Ferns to win, and we haven't, and it's hurt them. And of course, it deeply hurts me. But you learn to roll. I think allied to that, mate, it's probably the misconception about rugby and New Zealand rugby, and therefore what I and my team does is just how easy versus how hard it is to do what we do. Historically, the All Blacks have won, I think, 77% of the tests that they've played over 150 years. The Black Ferns are higher, right? The Black Ferns are like 85. 6 World Cups for Black Ferns, 3 World Cups, Olympic medals and sevens. people just think it's almost like we've got this entitlement to win. And regardless of the fact that there's 10, 12 other countries out there who are doing everything they can, tearing down the walls to beat us, and are getting better and have grown in the professional age. And this is one difference between high performance sport and business. The analogy I'll give is, imagine if you're Mobil, right? You're the owner of Mobil Petrol. And Mobil, I don't know what they've got. They used to have probably about 10% of market share, right? Because BP and Z and whatever else. But the owners of Mobil were probably pretty comfortable. You know, Mobil would be profitable. The business probably looked good on the P&L and the balance sheet. And so at 10% of the market, they can be happy, right? They survive, profitable. That's not the case in sport, is it? Every weekend, 2 teams go out and one has to be dominant. And the test of your success is winning, so better than 50%, or market dominance, right? You just win all the time. And New Zealand Rugby, we're expected to be market dominant all the time. And it's just bloody hard. And I don't think people, really appreciate just how hard it is to do what we've done historically and to keep trying to do it. And it's not an excuse either, by the way, because we're unashamedly after market dominance, and when we don't get it, that hurts, and we look hard at ourselves. But the reality is it's super hard, and you can do a lot of things right and not get there.
Well, mate, you've done a wonderful job. Like when you just stop and reflect on some of those numbers which you have grown, the market dominance. There's been periods in your involvement where the All Blacks particularly have been absolute dominant, and it's testament to all that work behind the scenes. But what I am interested though, where does the pressure come for you? Like that's a lot of pressure for anyone to cop. What are some of the pressures that you've had personally around this, and have you dealt with them and got through them?
There is pressure. Yeah, look, there's no doubt about that. And if you're not careful, and I haven't always been careful, you end up just with 2 emotions, right? You either have anxiety about how things are going to go, and then when they go well, when a team wins, you feel relief because you think, oh yeah, great, we were supposed to win that, or we were good enough to win that, and we did. That's good. We've delivered. But where's the joy in that analysis? And I think people probably think about, to the extent they know anything about what I do, they probably think, man, that's an awesome role. Imagine all the stuff he does every day. And sometimes I have to remind myself of that. Like, look back at my day, look back at my week, look at the people I was talking to, look at the issues I was dealing with. Isn't that amazing? So remembering to generate some joy and gratitude is, for me, that's been quite challenging. If I'm really honest, as a leader, you have to keep trying to find that joy and instill that gratitude in your people. So it's actually forced me to be probably a little bit less introverted, to keep my head up, keep my eyes out, think about my people, because naturally, if you just let the pressure get on top of you, you get into a hole really quickly. And again, there's probably some synergies with playing, right, and coaching, and in that example. The other thing I do, mate, to make my life a little bit easier, one of my hygiene factors is I don't read a lot of media. I don't really do social media at all. And I think that I just don't see those things adding to my ability to do my role or my ability to be at my best. And so I just keep away from that largely. Generally, when there are things that I need to see, opinions or ideas, I know that those articles or those podcasts will find me, and I just try to keep my focus on what's in front of me.
Yeah, mate, that's a cool little reflection, Chris, around, you got to be careful not to go to those two emotions, anxiety or relief, and bring him back. Remember to generate some joy. Just that phrase in itself, and instilling it in your people. Head up, eyes out. That's awesome. And I think there's one little caveat you talked about. It's similar to playing. There's a little bit of a difference between players and say coaches and your role. As players, they can just focus on self, whereas in your role, similar to a coach's role, you're actually got to get yourself right in order for others' benefit. Like, you're not just looking after yourself, you're looking after a team underneath you. So your hygiene elements that you're talking about is, whilst it's for you, it's also for the benefit of a lot of other people. So it's not just a insular player's perspective where they're just trying to get themselves right for them, and the byproduct is the team will do well. You're actually doing it for everybody around you, right?
Yeah, it's and so you've got to, in a role like this, you've got to ask yourself, what's your impact, right? So, for me, like, my role is not to drive a culture in one of our teams. Like, that's for our players and our coaches to do. But for me, it's about creating the conditions for success for our teams. Obviously, I've got my own staff here, Auckland, Wellington, around the country, and you can be a bit more hands-on and driving of culture with that group. But for me, the role, as you know, as you definitely know, I was not a rugby player of any note, right? Like, I loved the culture of rugby and the team, is why I kept playing until I finished. But I wasn't any good at it for a whole bunch of other very obvious reasons.
Where did you finish up? What level did you finish up? Was it 80s? Is that what we're talking?
Yep, it was Otago Uni social rugby. A long way from where I might have wanted to be when I was a young tacker. So for me, like, I can't go into the All Blacks or the Black Ferns and tell these people, like, how to be better technical and tactical coaches. I can't tell an S&C how to improve the team's conditioning profile. But what are my impacts that I can have in this big sort of overarching role? I guess the biggest thing is selection of people, right?
Yep.
Getting the people right that align with our values, our behaviours, have the talent and the capability. And then for me, it's about asking good questions. When we sat down in a review, we said that the team would focus on this. And I've come in for the last couple of days and I haven't seen this. So how are you addressing this? And, sometimes the answer might be, well, Lendo, we're addressing this by this, and you're not seeing it, but this is what we're doing over here. And you say, okay, that's cool. And sometimes the answer is, oh yeah, you're right. We sort of have got away from what we said we were going to do, and maybe there's a good reason for that, and sometimes there isn't. So for me, that's the role, right? Like, you don't drive the culture, but you put the people in place that are going to drive it, and you work really, really hard to nail that. That's the biggest impact you have. If you get your people selection wrong, it takes a really long time to unravel that. It's costly, it's messy, it impacts on performance. So for any leader, I think spending a significant amount of time focusing on who you're going to appoint is critical. And then it's asking questions and removing hurdles for people. I get a lot of phone calls from across the system. I've got a problem. We've got an issue here. Okay, well, let's see what we can do about that. And yeah, so you build, again, those are the calls that when you respond to, you build trust and relationships, which you can then capitalize on and leverage off later.
Do you think there's a little bit for leaders of other businesses and stuff which potentially don't have the sort of scope of intel you can get on whoever you're selecting? Do you think there's an element of gut feel that you can have about someone when you're selecting people, just going, this person resonates with me? Or do you think that's more, you got to be a bit more deeper diving than that?
I think gut feel is important, and there's a lot of emerging science and research about the importance of system one thinking, like your gut feel, that fight flight. Your body's a good coach. Actually,
Mm.
it
Ooh.
tells you things for a reason, but it can't all be that. And uh, one of the things I've learned in terms of this deep dive into people selection is you should go for a bit of science. You should use personality profiling. You really need to understand not just what a person is like on their best day, because if you meet them at an interview and then you do reference checks with people who are probably their mates, then you're just going to get a view of what people are like on their best day. But what you really need to understand as a leader and a selector of people is, what are they like on their worst day? What's going to be the ripple impact on your team? If we go right back to the 10-8s, Ben, what's going to be the impact on the team when that person is not at an 8? If everyone else, if the other 9 people are at 8, this person's at 6, are you going to equal 78, 58 because of the ripple of that person's down day? Or are you going to be at 118? So I think, so the answer, mate, is you've got to have both, right? You listen to your gut. It generally tells you the right thing to do, but make sure you've got some data and some science or some greater insight, objective insight to back that up.
I love it, mate. Your body's a good coach, but add data and objective data to it. Mate, I reckon that's a really awesome phrase, is like, when you're selecting, as in your role and any role that's selecting people, is having that in mind about what are people like on their worst days. Probably on the interview they're at their very best generally, but what are they like at their worst? Because it does have an impact, and it does have a flow down effect.
Yeah, and there are questions and things you can ask about that, but what it really tells you is a story about the person's self-awareness, right?
Ooh.
And again, you go back to some of those words we were talking about earlier: driven, open, teachable or coachable, like awareness of yourself, what makes you tick, why you do certain things or why you respond in certain ways when certain things happen, and being able to be open and communicate about that to people around you is just critical, right? If you're trying to get to that 120 level, then that's that knowledge of self that you can then help to inform others. I know why Ben's a bit down today, and I can understand why. Okay, now we know, right? We can talk about the ways to get Ben back up.
This is some absolute gold for anyone leading stuff around, Lendo. This is absolute magic, mate. I can see why you have been in your positions for so long, mate. Just the way you articulate words is absolutely outstanding. Absolutely outstanding.
Well, mate, I would, again, I've been privileged, and it is privileged to work in this role, because you see some of the very, very best, and are consistently exposed to it. I mean, I've spent a lot of time over the last 10 or 15 years with people like Wayne Smith, who go back to that, the discussion right at the outset about culture and the balance of care and connection and psychological safety with edge and accountability. There's a guy he's won World Cups in men's and women's rugby. Like, that is just amazing. And as you know, he's an amazing teacher, wonderful human. So if your head's up and your eyes are out and you're around people like that, you just can't help but learn, and you pick up little bits and pieces and apply them. So I've had a lot of advantages,
mate,
in getting to where I am today.
Your exposure to the world's very best is exceptional. But to be fair, to credit to you as well, you've still got to be open enough to take in that information. It would be very easy to, like you said, to just go down to the two emotions of anxiety and relief, and forget to open yourself up to just be a receptacle to house all this great knowledge that people are bringing by your doorstep every single day.
And I think if you like to learn, as I think I do, again, that's probably for other people to determine, but you get into those environments. Like I'm at my most joyful when I go into those team environments. Like I love spent a lot of time with the Black Ferns over the last 4 years, Ben, and
Mm,
I love going in there. And I love watching people go about their business and just learning little bits and pieces that are relevant. Like improving your understanding of what a nutritionist or a sports scientist does, what the S&C is trying to do.
mm.
Talk to the physio, understand what the manager's doing, chat with the coaches. It's um, that's you're just learning. You're in a learning mode the whole time, um, but you're also in support mode,
Yeah.
which is and I like doing that too. That's why I'm wired to, I think, to help people, to want to help. That's what makes me feel good. So that's where you get the joy.
I love it, mate. I love your words. And I actually love what you're talking about, just referencing some of that Black Ferns and Wayne Smith's involvement in that, but also yourselves, mate, because you've had a massive part to play in the rise of the women's game in New Zealand, but which flows on to the rest of the world. I know it's a passion of yours.
Mm.
How's this culture? The women's game has just gone exponentially through the roof, right? And it's the joy that game's been played with is just
Yep.
phenomenal. It's awesome to watch.
Yeah.
You've been right there on the driving that. What are your thoughts on why that is, and how have you helped that growth from your perspective?
Well, I don't want to go into a men are from Mars, women are from Venus type of analysis, but the word you used, mate, there is the word I use as well, which is joy. And that is the experience of women and girls sport. It is joyful. And I love watching our women's players. Like, they want to win desperately, but they walk out onto a field again, like their heads are up, their eyes are out, they're looking in the stands, they're laughing, they're crying in the anthem. Somebody makes a mistake on the field, they're smiling, they're picking people back up. And I guess my thesis on women's sport and women's rugby is, like, the world is becoming harder and harder for a lot more people to live just day to day. And it puts pressure on the search for joy. Joy is becoming an increasingly hard commodity for more people to find more often. And here we have this amazing growing women's rugby product, or women's sport generally, and it just brings the joy. And men's sport, and like, don't get me wrong, I'm as invested in the All Blacks as anybody, and our men's rugby success. But from having been in it, it can be a really serious,
Mm.
um, tense environment, and it's just different. It's not better or worse. Women's rugby it's a different product. It's a different game, and it's incredibly joyful and open. Um, and I love that, and I think that's what people are seeing. They like watching the game, they like watching the way it's played, they like the culture that our players weave through it, the way they express themselves on the field, and frankly are incredible ambassadors of it. You think
Mm.
about some of the greats of the game that I've been around with, the Sarah Hirini, or Portia Woodman, Whitcliffe. Like, they are not just remarkable rugby players, they are remarkable New Zealanders. I think they reflect the best of who we are as a growing nation, culturally diverse, leaders. Look at a younger player like a Georgia Miller, just a phenomenal athlete. I just think there's so much to be excited about. And we have done, I'm really lucky to have Hannah Porter lead our women's high performance team. Hannah and I have got a really strong relationship of trust and accountability. And I'd like to think together, we've done some really good things in terms of growing out the pathway and the investment in the women's game here in New Zealand over the last 3 or 4 years. But, mate, the job is never done. There's so much more growth to be had, and I think we desperately need to focus on how we commercialise the women's rugby and women's sport in general, how we get more fans into the game, more fans valuing and paying for that joy that women's rugby brings into their lives.
Wow, yeah, it's a cool concept. It's fascinating for people to hear that the joy is there, but like from your perspective, you have to keep evolving, keep trying to be dominant, and trying to commercialize the joy is part of the role, right? Like that's
Yeah,
sounds a bit rough, but it's the reality, right? Like
it's
you want to sustain
what
it.
yeah, sustainable. Like what I want for women's rugby is that it remains authentically what it is, but that the value that fans ascribe to that increases so that we can sustain that growth, so that it can keep building, rather than a situation that we've been in the last 10 years where the vast majority of the money that is raised for the game is raised by men's rugby and frankly raised by the All Blacks, right? And then every time you want to grow in the women's space, it feels like you're having to, I would say, beg, borrow, steal from the money that's been raised by the men's game. And look, that's part of the role is, making decisions of allocation and what to invest in and when. And, the Players Association are there with us, helping us, make those decisions in the player space. And they've been great supporters of the women's game as well. But we've got to insulate this game and enable it to grow on its own, not just be reliant on everybody else being successful and then investing in it.
Insulate the game, protect this particular portion of the game, isn't it? Make it, massive.
It's the biggest growth area for rugby, right? So little stat is from the 22 and 25 Rugby World Cups, over half the unique ticket purchasers at each of those events had never been to a game of professional rugby before. Over half in each case, in New Zealand and in England. So to me, that tells you everything you need to know about the commercial potential of women's sport and women's rugby. It's a different audience. It's a slightly different game. It appeals to different people. So for rugby to prosper as a game, for men and for women, we need to invest in and grow and take the opportunity that the women's game presents us.
Mate, that is an amazing groundswell of people just coming into the game. And it sort of gets back to this cultural piece where you can't, like, where is this coming from? There's no data to suggest what. It's just this feeling, this sentiment, and probably comes back to the joy, the joyous nature which those players on the field are playing, celebrating the game. People can see it, feel it. Those whispers trickle out, they ripple through a community, and it comes back with, like bums on seats, feet through door, and those crowds are a reflection of that bigger culture. That's that 8 times 10 equal 1,020 in that case, isn't it?
I think our job's to take that whisper and turn it into a chatter, and then turn that chatter into something bigger, into a wave. It's a bit of a mixed analogy probably, but you know what I mean? Like I just think there's so much goodness in it, in that side of our sport. We just need more people to know about it, more people to see it, to be able to touch and talk to their heroes. There's wonderful ambassadors that we have in the game, and it just builds and builds and builds.
Mate, I love that. That's almost like a little definition of leadership, mate. Is like turning whispers into chatter, as long as they're the things that you want the conversation to be going, is to amplify the whispers. And in that, what do you have a little, like, your leadership is you, mate? Do you have a little definition of leadership yourself? Or is it tough?
I don't. I think your definition changes. I don't have a definition, I suppose. Leadership is definitely multifaceted. For me, strategy and being able to point the way on our direction as a team or as a game is a critical part of leadership. And that's something that that's a skill set that I didn't have that I've had to actively work on and grow. But it's an area that I love, thinking about the challenge of how, for me, like how our teams in black uh, continue to win on the international stage forever into the future, so that when I'm 45 and when I'm 85, we can look back and watch rugby and still see our teams in black winning, still see us, weaving our authentic New Zealand culture through everything we do, taking that to the world, playing an attractive and engaging game. You've got to be deliberate in your thinking about how to achieve that. So that's a big part of it. We talked about selecting people, motivating and inspiring those people, growing them, I think is a massive part of leadership, developing others. And again, just building those relationships of trust, I guess, which enables all of those things that I just mentioned.
Mm,
So it's not one thing, is it, mate? It's
not.
every day there's a new challenge, and you just got to try to be at your best to meet the challenge.
Love that concept, mate, just on the strategy, and like that's a massive part of your role, isn't it? Like, how do you actually apply some of that stuff, mate? Like, you have to define it, you have to say why it's important, but like, how do you actually apply it day to day? Is it an easy thing to do?
Um, I think it's not easy. There's work you've got to put into it, but then you get a moment of clarity. At least that's been my experience. A moment of clarity where it all becomes so simple and so clear, and you know what you need to do.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe I don't know if it's easier in a sporting sense when you're pursuing winning, or in a business sense. In the end, strategy for a business is essentially how you make choices when you don't have enough money to do everything you want to do. And that means that strategy's got to be living. Your theory about, in a normal business sense, how do you make money, or in my sense, like how do we win? How do you win when you don't have enough money to invest in every single thing that you want to do? Then you've got to understand what really makes the business or the sport tick. What are the things that are non-negotiable that you, even with less resources available to you, actually you're going to invest more, into, say, coach development, or into whatever area you think makes the biggest difference. You have to understand that. You've got to know how your business works, how your sport works. And strategy does that. If you can figure out and even map, like on a piece of paper, how is it that our teams win? Why is it that for 125, 150 years, we've produced amazing rugby teams from New Zealand? Can you actually map that? And then, okay, what's different now? Can you map that? What's changing in the world? We talked about technological evolution. How's that going to impact on things? You try to do some forecasting, and then you just keep evolving it, because some of the things you think about strategically, you might think they're important, and then you figure out actually they're not that important, or other things are more important. So what strategy is not is, it's not static. It's not you come up with it and you set it for 5 years, you paint it on a wall, and that's what you go for. Like, that is, to me, that's not strategy. Strategy is, it's just constantly moving and evolving, and you're reviewing and renewing it all the time.
Mate, I think it's almost a little bit like culture, isn't it? Strategy. You can't say this is
100%.
hardline us. There's a lot of context. There's a lot of variance to it and nuances. And people like yourself who are well versed in the skill, in the dynamic of it, that's the art of it, isn't it? Is learning how to tack and change and twist where needed with experience, right?
Yeah, you're never done. I got a great piece of advice last year, I think, about the group, right? So the team, your group, the group that you're leading. Anytime one person comes into the group or one person leaves the group, you've got a new group. And I was like, man, that is right. Like the chemistry, the dynamics just change subtly, don't they? And so you've got to evolve. So your culture, you're right. The culture moves every day. And of course you don't change what you do every day, but you're never done.
Mate, I like that. Any time anyone comes into your group or anyone leaves the group, you have a new group.
That really resonated with me. It's so simple, isn't it, to
So
say, but when
simple.
you think about it, there's so much depth to it, and it informs what you do. Yeah, no, it's a good one, that one.
That is an absolute ripper. Groups are never static, are they? They're constantly evolving and moving. I love it. Now, Chris Lendo, we've come to the time in this thing where we've hit that hour mark. It zooms on by, mate. That's how we roll here, mate. We just get carried away. Now I've got one last question for you, brother. It's this.
Yeah, all good.
What is one belief about leadership or culture that you believe in that you reckon a lot of your peers or contemporaries would disagree with?
Well, here's a thought, which I think I don't want to say it's my own. It's an idea that I've been interested in for a couple of years, and it's about the value of diversity. Because you hear a lot about that, don't you? In sport, in society, in business, and I personally, I understand. I think the value of diversity, but diversity has different values in different situations. So it's going a step deeper than saying diversity is good. We need more of these types of people with these sorts of backgrounds or this sort of experience, and I distinguish between two situations. When you need to be in the creative space and think about new ideas and new solutions versus when you're just in the delivery space. You've just got to get some shit done, and really effectively and efficiently. And diversity has different values in those two situations. If you want new ideas, new solutions to old problems, having a really diverse group contributing from different perspectives is critical. It's going to maximize the opportunity to come up with great ideas. You'll get more ideas from different angles, and you'll find the right path more easily. In delivery, sometimes you need people who are super tight and connected to deliver hard, right? So if you think about, take it to the extreme example, like a military unit, for example, those people need to be like brothers and sisters, like family. They have to be so tight. They have to know where each other is physically and mentally all the time. In that scenario, if you're not careful, diversity can be a barrier to that, right? Just because of the different belief sets, the different assumptions that underlie all of us. And so I guess it's, to sum it up, it's just the concept of like diversity is great. We are better when we have diverse perspectives, certainly in business, certainly in lots of cases in sport, but sometimes in your job, in your company, in your sports team, you've just got to get stuff done, and really effectively and quickly. Maybe just, the value of diversity in those situations is just worth thinking about. So possibly contentious, but just an idea that was presented to me, and I think, yeah, man, that really, I've got a team of people here who deliver test matches and events, right? And they are so close. They're like family. And they're living in and out of each other's pockets on the road all the time. They just have to know where each other is physically, mentally, all the time. They're working 16-hour days. They've got to be tight. So in that scenario, I probably value the tightness more highly than and deliberately trying to put together a really diverse team.
Gee, mate. Chris, it's a joy, actually, mate, to listen to you talk.
That's the word.
Yeah, that's the word, mate. It's actually a joy because you're running the show, and to hear this, you articulate things like that, and the way you're thinking is refreshing. It's upbeat. It's ever changing, and I think it's a testament to your leadership, mate, that you're able to put things like that. And you're not a closed book. The things you talked about earlier about being open, growth mindset, you're still competitive. You sum that up, mate, in your leadership, and it's a joy to listen to, mate. It's an absolute joy. Now, Chris, there we've come to that time. I'd like to just sum up this podcast with my 3 takeaways that I've taken from this deep and insightful conversation from yourself. Number 1 is the democratization of the world that we're going through. Now, this is deep, but you mentioned that humans now have easier access to the technical and tactical knowledge. That access to that knowledge is everywhere. So the real important part for coaches and leaders throughout is how and where are you going to grow yourself? And a lot of that is that people side of things. Getting good at the leadership stuff that you talked about, not just the X's and O's, because AI is going to be smashing that pretty soon. Number 2, I loved this phrase about joy. It came up multiple times, and you referenced that under pressure in hard times, you yourself went to 2 emotions, anxiety or relief, and you forgot a little bit about the joy, but your ability to remember that, to generate some joy and gratitude and instill it in the people that you work with is hugely important to cultures. You reference the phrases head up, eyes out. And I just think that's a lovely one as leaders just to remember, especially when times get tough, when you're at your worst potentially, to keep your head up and eyes out and remember the joy that this is a game. Love that. Number 3, mate, you're never done. I just think culture, strategy, leadership is always changing. And you made this beautiful little quote that anytime one person comes into your group or leaves your group, you have a new group. The chemistry changes. And I just think that's a lovely one, particularly for this podcast, that just to remind us as coaches, as leaders, even as people in teams, that groups are never static. They're always evolving. And when you remember that, I think the real personal side of your touch as a leader comes out. Chris Lendrum, what an absolute pleasure to have you on the Coaching Culture podcast today.
Thank you, mate. I've loved it. And now I've got to go and open the door, walk back out into the office and actually live everything that I've said. So, no, I've loved it. I love these conversations, love what you're doing, talking about these issues. So thanks for having me.